Welcome to the European College of Neuropsychopharmacology podcast, where we interview the most interesting people in translational neuroscience.
Hello, my name is Aiste Lengvenyte. I'm a psychiatrist and PhD student in France, and now I'm also a chair of the Early Career Advisory Panel. And here today I am very glad to be speaking with Christina Dalla, who is Associate Professor in Pharmacology, Medical School National and Postdoctoral University of Athens. She's also President of the Mediterranean Neuroscience Society, past President of the Hellenic Society of Neurosciences, and also President of Hellenic Brain Council. She has multiple involvement also in ECNP activities, in networks, and also Scientific Program Committee in 2022, Educational Committee currently, Scientific Advisory Board, many activities. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I would like to start going way back, if you are okay with that.
Yes.
You are a trained pharmacologist.
Yes.
How did you choose this field and how did you move to doing pharmacological research?
Yes, actually I'm a pharmacist with license to have a pharmacy, but I never wanted to have a business. So I knew I wanted to pursue another career and have a PhD. So I was always fascinated by the brain and psychopharmacology. I was fascinated, I'm still fascinated by the fact that we can give a medicine and change behavior, and how many things we still don't know about the brain and how drugs are acting in the brain. So I thought the only way was to have a PhD in psychopharmacology. At the time, we didn't really have many master courses in Greece. So I had my PhD directly after the pharmacy school, which was 5 years. And 5 years of pharmacy and then 5 years for the PhD. At the medical school, I had an amazing mentor, a woman that she was also a pharmacist and then a psychopharmacologist. So that was very good for me. I was lucky because at the time they were also involved at the ECNP, my mentor and other colleagues from Greece. And they were really supporting and they were sending me to meetings. And so first I got a poster award, then I got a travel award, and I was
and then
always...
you stayed.
Yes. So I think it's one of my favorite societies.
And this mentor of yours, was she your PhD advisor?
Yes. She was Professor Zeta Papadopoulou-Daifoti. Now she has passed away and we miss her very much. But she was really active in this field, and she was the one that had the idea to work on sex differences, about models of stress and depression and anxiety, and of course antidepressant response. But then I liked the idea a lot, so I took it in a way and I evolved it and put other ideas and projects in this. And I'm still working on this.
Yeah. So many of your projects are on sex-based differences or in medicational response and also diseases. Can you walk us through how you first started on that? What were the initial ideas that you confirmed or maybe then refuted?
Yeah, so at the time, that was in 2000, they were doing a model of depression, the chronic mild stress model of depression in male rats. So we had the idea to replicate that on female rats.
And do you know why it was? Because I know that at the beginning it was only males.
Yes. For many decades it was only males because they thought it was easier. They thought that the behavior of females was more variable. Nowadays there are many meta-analyses that they have shown that this is not true. Yes. So we were one of the very first labs that we had the idea to do this research on females. There was some experience in the lab with females because they were doing some endocrinology studies in the past with the estrogen and other studies more related to hormones. So we had the idea to do the chronic mild stress on females, and it was one of the first studies. So we validated the model on females and also the 4-swim test. At the time we did a lot of validation also for that and different phases of the estrogen and see if the animals respond different. And the sex difference also on serotonin, and we were measuring serotonin in the brain and we could see that they were differences between males and females. And then every project that we are doing since then, it's always on both males and females. Always we compare both. In the meantime, I went at Belgium for a year with a Marie Curie fellowship during my PhD. And that was in a way my motivation. I wanted to do it. Of course, my supervisor was very supportive and she said, okay, you can go, although I had to leave my lab for a year, but she was very supportive. And the lab where I went, it was a neuroendocrinology lab. So they were totally out of the psychopharmacology.
Was it still preclinical
field.
Or was it more clinically oriented?
It was very basic research. Okay. They were working on birds and fish. I learned so much about neuroendocrinology and steroids, but they also had some mice, the aromatase knockout mice, that they don't make any estrogen. So they wanted me to help them with some behavioral studies on these mice, and we had some very nice projects with estrogen depletion and see how this was related to depressive, in a way, symptomatology. When I finished my PhD in Greece in 2005, I went for a postdoc at the States, at New Jersey, at Rutgers University. Again, I had an amazing mentor, Professor Tracy Shores, that she's still very active and she's a role model for me. She's amazing. And again, it's not that I really had any connections or I didn't know anyone there. I sent a few emails, but I already had a few papers from my PhD, and also the team in Belgium was very supportive, and they knew the professor there, that he was a very good professor, Jacques Balthazar, in Belgium. So Tracy Shores decided to bring me from Greece to New Jersey and pay me from her grants, which was a big step, yes. And that was very good for me, of course. And then I got a Marie Curie fellowship, another one. Again, yes. She helped me with writing, but it was mostly a collaboration idea. That was for 3 years. So then I was also more independent in a way during my postdoc, and it was very good money also to travel and explore more things and go to meetings. And there, the topic was more neuroscience. It was about adult neurogenesis and stress and memory, and how memory can induce survival of new neurons in the brain, in the hippocampus. And I was the first one that did that also on females, because again, they were only doing males.
So it's always this trace on sex is important.
Yes. But this lab, actually, Professor Tracy Shores was doing studies on males and females, but about stress and learning, not about neurogenesis. So I was the first one that did it on neurogenesis at her lab. Before they were also from other labs that they were doing it. And we found that actually more new cells were surviving in the hippocampus of female rats than males, because actually females were learning better than males on this particular task. It was a conditioning task, and so they were learning better. Female rats were learning better, so they had more new neurons survived in their hippocampus. So they were all studies on sex differences in a way.
That's fascinating. And after that, since it has been a few years now, was it replicated in humans, similar studies, or what do we know about these memory differences in females and males?
Yes, actually, it's difficult to measure.
I imagine.
Yes, adult neurogenesis, there are not many ways to measure it in humans, but there were some indirect studies. So we know that it can improve mood, like learning also, and exercise. Aerobic exercise can improve mood. So nowadays, Professor Tracy Shores is doing human studies with women and men, and she finds that women respond very well to interventions that we believe that they can enhance neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, like aerobic meditation.
So the hypothesis would be that maybe women would respond better to these interventions, or not necessarily?
Most of them are women with trauma or some stressful experiences. They have very good response. Now, I don't know if they have really compared it to males, because it's more like
female specific.
Yes, it's based mostly on women with sexual violence attacks. So it could be because they're also more motivated to do it, and they like this kind of intervention. So it could have a sex difference there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. I work as a psychiatrist. What we see, there are many depressed women and men, but it's women that are generally come more for consultation or are more engaged in certain interventions.
Yes, that's probably the gender effect that also plays a role. It's not only sex biological factor, but I think it's a combination of things. It's so much multifactorial. Differences that we see. We know that women suffer from depression twice as men,
but men die by suicide more often.
Yes, that's also very interesting. Very sad, of course, but very interesting to see why this is happening. Also, other sex differences in anxiety, PTSD, autism disorders. So it's, and we know that it's probably societal reasons and environment, but it's also genes, genetic hormones, epigenetics. It's very multifactorial and complicated.
I was also wondering, you just mentioned a few times hormones.
Yes.
So both women and men have hormones, of course.
Yes.
All that estrous cycle, but also testosterone.
Yes.
So I was wondering, not many people are evaluating that. Most of people include sex and usually as a covariate. So in your opinion, how important is it to look at the cycle, hormonal cycle, or measure hormones?
Yes, I think it's at clinical settings. I think it's even more important than in preclinical. Of course, we always do it in preclinical studies because we do that in our lab.
How do you do it in your lab?
We measure the estrous cycle by vaginal smears. So it's easy if you know how to do it, but it's not very complicated. It's not something invasive or difficult. So it's like a pap test in a way. So we take a smear and we put it on the microscope and we can see the cells and we know. So the rats have 4 to 5 days of cycle. And they have a phase where estrogen is higher and then estrogen drops. So we can know from this cycle, from the phases of the cycle, we can know, we have an idea of the hormonal levels. And it's a bit difficult to do, of course, studies in all different phases of the cycle, but we have done it and it can be done. But then in humans, in clinical trials and in many human studies, they don't even care if women are cycling, if they're menopausal, if they're on the pill, or which phase of the cycle. And we believe that this is something, it would be easy to measure because you can just ask.
Yeah, most women will tell you.
And it would be very important, because especially for acute treatments, it would be very good to know where to give, when to administer treatment. For example, for esketamine, or now we are talking about psychedelics, and these are usually treatments that they are not happening every day.
Yeah.
Especially psychedelics, all the clinical trials are only for one or two shots. It would be very good to know when to give it. If it would be on the first weeks or...
Yeah, no studies have.
Yes,
in my
no
opinion,
one really.
Nobody looked at it,
Yes, and we also believe that maybe some clinical trials in the past, maybe they failed because of this, because they ignore sex and gender.
I think you wrote with your colleagues a paper on corticotropin-releasing hormone that performed good in rats, but that was the time of male rat dominance in preclinical research.
Exactly,
and in clinical populations is mostly females in depression.
Exactly, yes, because that was during our times, actually. So we were all very excited to see the CRF antagonists go into clinic, and because we had seen the preclinical studies in males, they were all very impressive. They were very big labs that they were doing that at the States and from NIH and companies also. So we were all expecting the results of the clinical trials, and they all failed. And then we realized that all the clinical trials were mostly on women, because depression is more common in women, and it was easier to recruit women. There were also some men, but the percentages are something like
25% in general.
So it was 70 to 30 or 80 to 20. And we realized that there was a mismatch between the preclinical and the clinical studies. So that's a theory, of course, we can never know. But it's possible that these antagonists, maybe they were good only for males, or maybe some specific types of depression or symptoms.
Male depression,
Yes.
For example.
Or maybe alcohol-induced stress disorder. You know better than me, but because they were tested for many different psychiatric disorders, and they failed because there was not really any. Of course, there were other problems as well, and if you talk to the industry, they will say that some compounds were not maybe good enough, or there are always many problems, but I think we'll never know.
Yeah. Okay. And have there been any advances now in pharmacological trials that take into account? There are some treatments that are specifically for females, for example, Zuranolone, that is just for female because it's female indication. Male don't usually get postpartum depression, but in a classic term at least. Have there been any other advances in sex-based psychopharmacology?
Very few, unfortunately. Yes, that's a very good example, but it was in a way mostly happened thanks to neuroendocrinology and not so much thanks to neuropsychopharmacology. There is, for example, there are some studies about zopiclone that it's supposed to have a lower dose in women than men. And so we believe that in some cases there should be some difference also in dosing because the side effects also differ. But there are not any systematic studies about it. There is not much specific funding for all this. And of course, it's not only women, because when we're talking about gender, is a very large term.
It's a spectrum also.
Yes, a spectrum. So we need more gender-specific studies and also account for gender identity and other factors. And there is not really any funding for that specifically. So I hope in the future it will be more. I also wrote a piece at Nature Mental Health because they asked me to write about this, how we need to have more funding about sex and gender specific studies.
Could you give us your key messages from this important opinion?
Yes, the key message is that actually we need those that they give the money to care, first of all, and the regulators as well. Because you already said that I'm also the Brain Council and the Hellenic Brain Council, so we're trying to do some advocacy as well.
Very important.
And it's important, of course, to engage the public and the patients, but we also need to convince politicians, regulators, and funding agencies. So if they are convinced and if they require these kind of studies and they promote them, then we can have more gender-specific studies, because we need more tailored treatments. We cannot have a drug for everything. We have seen that in psychiatry so far. So,
but even the newest, like I'm working in psychiatry, even the newest, most exciting molecules, they are extremely unspecific, like ketamine or psychedelics. They just decrease inflammation, increase plasticity.
Yes, it's true. But these are very exciting. It's a very exciting field, and I also want to pursue more studies on that. We're doing some ketamine studies
in rat models.
Yes, males and females, of course, and we find sex differences.
Yeah. What are the differences in ketamine?
It seems that females respond a bit better with ketamine, about anxiety mostly. Anxiety parameters. And depression is very difficult to model in rats.
There's lots of discussion on preclinical models of depression.
Yes. But anxiety is more straightforward and stress response. So we need more targeted treatments. Like, I don't think we can find a silver bullet that will cure everything for everybody. I hope we could, but it's the only way to find more targeted treatments, and also to know when to administer something, which phase of the cycle, and what dose, what dosage scheme.
Have you looked at it in the phase of cycle in your, for example, ketamine studies?
We always monitor the cycle. So far, we haven't seen any differences, but this is ongoing. So if we have more rats, then we might find a difference.
Probably.
Yes.
Also so much shorter than females, but also females. I'm a clinician, so it varies a lot from person to person, the psychological impact of the cycle. And
for sure, yes. In rats, it's much easier in a way. Yes, and of course, each person responds different, and especially in psychiatry. But there are some things that I think that they can be done. And also, with the ketamine study, actually we use it as a comparison because we are pursuing some other studies. We are targeting the GPER1 receptor of estrogen. It's a receptor there is in the brain, but also in the ovaries and other tissues for estrogen, but it's a membrane receptor. So it has a fast non-genomic effects. It's not the classical steroidal receptors that we learn at biology and pharmacology. They are membrane receptors. So we believe that if we can activate these receptors, we can have a rapid effect that maybe could mimic ketamine effect in a maybe more safe way because it doesn't have anything to do with addiction or abuse. And we do these studies both in females and males because males have this estrogen receptor as well. So in the brain. So
do you have already some results? Exciting?
In some cases, for depression, not yet, but for anxiety, in some cases they work similar to ketamine. At least it seems like they have some common molecular pathways. So all these pathways that they are targeted with ketamine that we really don't know exactly yet. I mean, the scientific community does not know exactly yet which is the therapeutic pathway. But it seems that some of them are common with estrogen membrane receptors. And that's very interesting. And we have constructed a virus, an AVV, to overexpress genetically the receptor in the brain. But yes, this is just starting to happen, and so to see more localized effect of the brain in the hippocampus.
So you can compare different parts of the brain where the things are actually happening.
Yes, because with the pharmacological treatments, if you give it from the periphery, you can also change the cycle, change the peripheral hormones in both females and males. It's not only the females. So we're trying to do some studies more localized. That is something that we can do in rats that we cannot do in humans.
Maybe with some time, like now we have these deep brain stimulations and
there is some
advance.
Yes, because another issue that we are recently talking a lot is about animal research and whether this is important. There was a movement, I don't know if you know about it, the European Commission from the citizens, and they asked to ban all animal research.
Yeah, there's always that.
Yes, this one was bad because they had thousands of signatures, and the European Brain Council and others have really, they made an effort to really respond to this, and we think that we have made a difference for the Commission. So I think this is a very good example why we need animal research, because we cannot do deep brain stimulation in humans without
knowing where to put exactly.
Yes, this would be unethical and dangerous. Because, of course, we hope that one day we'll be able to phase out all this animal research, and we hope that we can find alternatives. But for now, we need it for the brain research, for sure. And for neuropsychopharmacology, definitely.
Yes, you're doing a lot of advocacy also for research and clinical research.
And women in science and gender, yes.
Just since your topic connects the sex and gender and women and men, that will be a provocative question. In your opinion, this recognition of sex differences, some could say that so we show that females are different from males, so maybe it's not good for gender rights. What's your take on that?
Yes, that's a very good question. We get that a lot. If that's sexist in a way. I also serve at the Gender Equality Committee of my university, So there are many women that they are very more classical feminists in a way. And we talk a lot about these issues. We don't believe that this is sexist. I will believe that, on the contrary, it's good for everybody because we're talking about disease and treatments. And if there are differences, we need to recognize them.
There's no one model of perfect human that is either male or female.
And it doesn't mean that we are superior or inferior. There are just some differences. And of course, it's a spectrum, as you already mentioned, and there is a huge overlap. Like the easiest thing to understand is the height. Of course, men are taller than women, but there are always some women that are taller than some men. Of course, it's a spectrum. But in average, there are some differences that in average are very easy to find, and we need to recognize them. And of course, we care about gender in general, as I said, not only binary, male and female. I think it's something that everybody needs to understand, that we're doing this for the good of...
Understanding the variety, it's not to say that it's either good or bad that way. I think it's showing that you're all diverse and we need adapted, personalized approaches.
Exactly, yes. And we need to understand the brain in order to understand disease and then make better treatments. Because someone could say, okay, then why do we care if women are better in languages or some kinds of mathematics, or the opposite, that men are better in 3D? Okay, and maybe we don't care. It's not really relevant, but it could be also good to know how the brain works and find appropriate treatment, because then we can understand why there are sex differences in cognition, maybe why women get Alzheimer's disease more often than men, or and dementia. In order to treat all this, we need to understand.
Sure. Jumping to future.
Yes.
In your opinion, in next 20 years, what are the things, the biggest discoveries that you're waiting for in the sex-based analysis in neuroscience, also in general?
Yes, I thought you would ask about psychopharmacology, and I would say psychedelics.
Psychedelics.
Yes. Because I really think it will be very groundbreaking in a way treatment. We'll see, of course. But for neuroscience and sex differences, actually, our goal is to put this in the everyday practice, to have
that is just used everywhere.
Yes. So it won't really be groundbreaking or something so different. It's just to have this as something standard in preclinical neuroscience, that everybody would always do, males and females. And also even at your clinical practice, to have some guidelines and some ideas how to treat differently according to gender, and of course other factors that they play a role, like age or genetics maybe in the future. Also, this will also be very important. But we hope that we won't have to advocate for that for so long. Yes.
Has taken already some time.
Yes, definitely. But still there is a lot to be done.
Since you work mostly on preclinical model, talking about psychedelics, are there preclinical models of not ketamine but more classic psychedelics?
Yes, there are with psilocybin. There are very good studies also from the ECNP psychedelics. It's a target group, it's not a network yet.
By Gitte Knudsen.
Yes, there are some exciting studies from there. And of course, most of it so far is classical behavioral pharmacology and, of course, molecular and neuroplasticity indices. And there are some very good studies from the States about serotonin receptors, 5-HT2A. But I know that there will be also in the future more preclinical studies with more sophisticated behavioral studies and experiments, and like with machine learning and AI for preclinical work, but also maybe for clinical.
If you want biomarkers. Yeah. What I found fascinating, because psychedelics, it's a thing that can be looked and is looked currently from two different perspectives, like clinicians that come mostly from psychology and say this is the trip that matters, the change in your perspective. And then there is all this more basic science that shows also changes in biomarkers, changes in brain function, and also that it changes things in rats or mice that don't necessarily have a trip.
Yeah, we don't really know.
We don't know, yeah.
Yes, what they have. Because recently I heard a talk about how some animals, they eat the mushrooms, I mean, outside in nature, and they have an experience. I mean, we can never know what they really experience, but you can see that they have some alteration in behavior. So maybe they also have some
maybe it's also transformating for them.
Could be.
Could be. I would like to also come back to your career that has been very fascinating, and you're working on so many diverse topics.
Thank you.
Have there been major challenges or difficulties that you have to overcome, or particularly difficult moments of grants or papers?
Of course, there are always difficulties, and especially because I work in Greece. After 2008, I returned in Athens and I took over the lab. So for many years, I have my own lab.
Was it difficult? Or are there like cultural differences compared to United States and Belgium?
It's not so much cultural, no. It's more lack of organization and funding. So of course,
money matters.
Yes, of course, at the States the funding was much higher, and also the university was not so organized, and so we still have, but nowadays it's a bit better. There was also the economical crisis in Greece.
2008.
Yes, just when I returned. So for many years it was very difficult to get grants, and so we had to rely very much on collaborations, on our network. It was good that I knew people also from other labs, and
so that moving around helped in the end.
A lot, yes, and keeping a good relationship with colleagues, and so we could do some experiments in our lab and send them the brains, or they could send me brains to measure serotonin, and that was very good also for publication. So then later we could get bigger grants and become members of networks. Of course, there's always disappointment with publications, but
That's a part of life.
Yes, I think it's a very constructive process. Now I'm also a section editor for European Journal of Neuroscience, so I know it
you see from the different side.
From the other side, yes, and I think it's always good to get some comments, even if they are not mean. But if they are constructive comments, it's good to ameliorate. I think it was good for us to improve our work and procedures. And we managed to have some very good publications. Of course, not Nature or Science, but we had molecular psychiatry and neuropsychopharmacology and European neuropsychopharmacology, of course. And we're very proud of that. And then I think the most challenging thing, that's probably everywhere, it's the personal relationships, how to deal with other people, how to...
I think that's something, at least when you're starting, especially when you're starting in another country, that can be challenging. Do you have some recommendations for people that are just starting about how to best go about their career? Or
yes, it's a bit difficult because it depends on the personality, of course. And I think it's very important to be proactive and always try with a good in mind and think that the other person is always positive in a way.
Most people mean well in research, expect that.
Yes, yes. The thing is that I think it's more difficult when you get more senior and they start to see you as more competitive in a way. I had these problems later, even nowadays, that I am in a more senior positions, because before they didn't consider me as competition in a way so much.
You were workforce.
Yes, exactly, because women are very good in organizing stuff and work a lot and they're very dedicated. Of course, this is a generalization. There are excellent men as well. But anyways, I think we need to be resilient and not really care so much about what other people think. And just do our job well and aim for the best and for excellence, of course, and feel good with ourselves that we are doing the best we can. Be ethical and not really think about what the others think so much. And it's okay if some people don't like us.
Yeah. It's hard to accept maybe when you are just starting, you want to be liked by all your supervisors or researchers that are important to you. Yeah, but the most important thing is research itself, probably.
For sure, yes. And feel well inside yourself.
And you have to feel good about it.
Yeah, so if you are confident about what you're doing and you're yourself, and of course, if you're not confident, that's still okay, but you can seek help and get in a network with other people that have the same point of view. It's very important to have networks and support.
Yeah, you're in many networks in Europe, but also in Greece.
Yes.
How do you think they helped to shape your view in your research or change your collaborations or?
A lot. Now I have a much more multidisciplinary approach, and I have worked a lot with clinicians and psychiatrists, and this has really helped me a lot, yes. And I think it was good for them as well.
I think because at least what I see, I'm more from clinical point, but I see there is a gap between preclinical people and clinical, because preclinical, you're doing such a great job, but for us clinicians, it's sometimes Chinese. We don't understand.
Yes, I know. It's important to make it in a way understandable. I'm also involved in some science communication activities, especially from FENS, the European Neuroscience Society, the Federation, and we're trying to really explain things in a simple way, even for the general public, but also, of course, for other colleagues that they're not in the same exact field. And I think it's very important to be able to communicate your work. And it's good, very good to speak with other specialties. Also in my lab, I always have pharmacists, biologists, psychiatrists, other medical doctors, chemists. We work a lot with chemists because we do analysis. Diverse. Yes. Even from the School of Agriculture, they have come, because we have some projects with natural bioactive compounds. Of course, always in males and females, but for the brain. And so I think it's important. And psychologists, that they pursue neuroscience.
Yes, you're covering it all.
Yes, I think it's important also for the students to talk to each other and interact like that and participate in meetings. It's very important to, even online, if someone does not have the funds to go, nowadays it's much easier to watch
information
something.
Is there, you just have to look for it.
Yes, that's the only, because I didn't have a master's degree at the time. So that's the way I learned also many stuff from colleagues and from meetings and, of course, studying and reading a lot because that's also important. But I don't stay only on my specific field. I stay in the brain because I don't want to work much outside the brain. It will get too complicated, only for some endocrinological stuff. But I am trying to read also different, more broad things about psychology or psychiatry.
Yeah. Also gives ideas sometimes you did not expect to find.
Yes. Even to read the DSM. Most basic researchers have never read the DSM, but...
It was Sorango that I did a podcast also for ECNP recently, that he said that he reads just like general medical papers just to keep updated.
Yes.
So it's another approach.
Yes, and I'm a pharmacist originally. So in Greece I serve at committees for the National Organization of Medicines. So we approve drugs. Ketamine was approved in Greece by a committee that I was a member. But in this committee we don't only have psychiatric drugs, we have all kinds of drugs. So I need to read about the SPCs and all the about these drugs. And I like it because I like medicines, it's my field. But it's very informative for me. And it's very interesting because you can see that there are immune medicines for immune disorders or for inflammation. They have so many side effects in the brain. And they all cause dizziness or,
Or the history of interferons and their treatments with depression, suicide. That was a big thing,
Yes, so many. So that's really helpful. I think it's good to have a broader perspective. Of course, to try to stay focused in research for me, it was very helpful that I was focused on a specific field of anxiety, depression, and antidepressants, and sex difference, of course. Because it's good to be known for a specific thing. Yes, that's.
So you're the expert in this.
Yes. Now another challenge, of course, always is the personal life and how we can combine.
That's the question.
Yes, I'm sure that.
100.
And that's very variable, of course, because always it depends on where you come from, your family, the support that someone has. So for me, it was good because in Athens I have a family, but my mom died when I was a PhD student, so she couldn't really help me much, only since 25. And then, but I have two sisters, so I have a lot of support and many friends and other family, and my dad, of course, was there. But then I went to the States with my partner, and then we got married when we were there. We had a daughter, and then we got divorced some years later. But that was okay because it was something
part of life.
Yes, it was part of life, and we really we have shared custody, and that was really helpful for me for my career. And so again, we just need to get the good things out of everything.
Yes. So just to summarize, because we are wrapping up today, sex is important. We have to look at females and males, if possible, also sex hormones. It's also important to stay open, try to translate from clinical to preclinical, but also for more personal things, be open for opportunities, be present, be proactive, travel if you can a bit, and be involved in international or national organizations, because that gives context with people with our different opinions and different goals.
Yes, exactly.
So thank you very much for coming. It was very interesting to listen, and thanks everybody for listening. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from the European College of Neuropsychopharmacology. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the interviewee and not necessarily the official position of the ECNP. And of course, this should not be the basis for clinical treatment decisions.